Well, let's move on and once again put the spotlight on mental health. We've had a series of conversations, we've had a special campaign here that we've brought up, and quite frequently we do talk about the big challenge of depression, of anxiety, and in general, how we don't pay attention to our mental health. Tonight we speak about those who are in the limelight, those who are in fields of extreme high pressure, who have careers which are high pressure careers with a lot of expectations. Today we talk about those who are for a lot of time in the public glare, whether it's from the glamour world or from this field of sports. And while it may look like everything's going in their favor, while it may look like they are much loved and always successful and everything is going great in their lives, it isn't always so. Because fact of the matter is, when it comes to mental health and it comes to depression or anxiety or even other issues, nobody is immune. And your class, lifestyle, background, caste, none of that matters at all. Indian captain Virat Kohli, in a conversation with Mark Nicholas for a podcast that he recently did, spoke about how he suffered from depression during the England tour in 2014, where he was going a lean patch, and those who track cricket very closely and have a good memory will obviously remember this. Kohli actually went on to say that he felt like the loneliest guy in the world. And he was talking about this phase of his life. He said it wasn't a great feeling, that you are not in control of anything. You feel like you are not in control of anything. You don't understand what's going on or how to get over it. You don't understand how to get over it. Virat Kohli actually opened up quite a bit and said that, well, that phase was a big revelation for me, and I think that professional help is a key factor. Now, this is not the first time that he has mentioned the struggle that he witnessed and went through actually in 2014 during this tour and this patch of his life. But he's actually just another of those very loved, respected celebrities in our country and across the world who've now spoken up about mental health and them going through it. And so tonight I want to talk about challenges of a high-pressure career, of a sports person or a star, musician, an actor, anybody who has a big public profile, and a lot that depends on which phase of their life of success and failure are they going through, and how much their performance on a day-to-day basis could even impact their mental health. And if we have a strong system to really help them and guide them through such tough times. So let's say good evening to the panelists who are actually joining us right now. And I'm very glad to say good evening to Pullela Gopichand, the former Indian Badminton Player, a very famous name in our country, and he's brought great accolades for us and continues to do so in many of his avatars. I've also got Virendra Skina, former India hockey captain and CEO of the Olympic Gold Quest. I'm truly glad to have both of you here on this conversation. Let's also say good evening to Dr. Jini Gopinath. He's a performance coach for several of the cricket tournaments, including the IPL. And Dr. Saida Ruksheda, always a pleasure to have conversations with her, a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist joining us this evening. So thank you so much. Gopichand, let's start off with you. Virat may not have opened for the first time and may not even be the first sports star to talk about it, but it doesn't often get acknowledged. Or for the common man, the understanding is, oh, everything's going great for them. Everything is, hunky-dory for them. Help our viewers understand the kind of challenges and pressures that a sports or an athlete actually faces on a daily basis.
Well, I think sport is tough. It's great that Virat has spoken about it. But I think across sport, everybody who's played high-level sport would acknowledge the fact that it is quite lonely out there, especially when you start playing at the highest levels. Because you start off with a lot of friends, a lot of people support you when you are the underdog. But as time goes by and the slots get limited, then there are a lot of pressure on various fronts and that actually take a toll on you. So there is pressure, and I think the journey to the top is lonely, especially if you're spending a lot of time around. And if you have friends only in the sporting arena, also that adds to the pressure, because there is some kind of a relationship which is related to your performance. So I think there are things which are definitely contributing to the loneliness of a sports person, and it is, I think, common to most sports person, I would say.
Viren, would you agree the fact that it gets lonelier with the more success that you get, the higher up that you go, it gets lonelier, or would it also be dependent on the sport and the kind of setup that you are in?
Yes, of course. I think there are, for me, it's very important that we have a great team around which can pull you out from those points. And from the perspective of an athlete, I think to have trust on his ability is very, very important, because when you go through a bad patch, that is something which affects you. And if that does, then to have a strong relationships, it would be important. Your family and friends become a very important source. And the third one will also be the maturity of the society around to understand what it means. Because you might just be going through a lean patch, and then if the society around is not critical of you, or you trust the society to be forgiving in some sense, or not be judgmental in some sense, then that gives you the confidence. So the three things for me which would be important would be trust on your ability in self, you have strong relationships, and then your trust on the society. So these three become important things for you to come back.
Viren, what's your view? Is it also a lot to do with the fact that you have to follow such a strict regimen? If you want to be successful in any sport, you will have to lead an extremely disciplined life, avoid a lot of distractions, focus on your own training. Does that add to the mental health challenge?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on the show. I just want to start by saying that I'm definitely not an expert in the field over here, but just having played sport for a lot of years, and now with OGQ looking after the training of a lot of India's elite athletes, I think that that for sure the discipline level in athletes is at an extremely high level, and they face a lot of pressures. I'm really happy to see that discussions on mental health are coming to the fore, especially over the last few years. It's becoming something that is much more acceptable. And I must say that it is a big gap area in Indian sport. We definitely need many more trained sports psychologists in the country. I'd just like to add over here that, in sport, we give a lot of emphasis on physical injuries. I think we need to give a lot more emphasis to emotional injuries as well, because you cannot physically see those injuries, but they are equally important to deal with. Secondly, I just want to say that just as we lay importance on prevention of physical injuries, I think it's equally important to look at prevention of mental injuries as well, and not just the curative aspect or reacting to something when problems happen. I would also like to add that I think just the athletes are under pressure all the time, whether they win or whether they lose. And the pressure to constantly perform and stay on top of their game is always there. And it's very important to have, as Gopi mentioned, the right environment. Sometimes it can be forgiving, sometimes it can be encouraging, and we have to encourage the right environment. And I think we also must encourage athletes to seek the right professional help as and when required. Mental training is not something you can force down the throats of athletes, but when they want help, we must ensure that they have the opportunity and the platform to speak to the right trained sports psychologists without anyone being judging them in any way. And also, I think mental training should not be just when you have a problem. Sometimes it should also be used as a accepted part of training where we use it to improve our performance by that 1%, because sometimes at the highest level it's the 1%ers that make a difference. And if we train athletes in the right basics of mental training even from a younger age, I think it can only benefit all Indian athletes even from a younger age.
Okay, so I want to pick up a couple of points that both you and Gopichand have given me and take it to our experts. And let me actually start with Dr. Gopinath. Dr. Gopinath, one, of course, important point is to have that support system, to be able to have access to that kind of professional help. In fact, when we were researching for this, and my research team actually told me that Harmanpreet Kaur just a few months ago did speak up, and she asked the BCCI to ensure that there is a psychologist that travels with the team, that spends time with the team when they go for their tournaments. Is that an important aspect that we often tend to ignore?
Yes, thank you. That's a very valid question, by the way, primarily because of a couple of reasons. One primary reason is most of our athletes are not aware that they're going through a tough time. Either they are in the denial side or lack of education about the mental skill set training itself. Because primarily in our system, most of our training is into physical fitness and the outer game generally. But the inner game is not being discussed much. So whenever there is a problem comes up in the psychological system, most of them are not trained enough in terms of handling it by themselves. The basic first aid itself, psychological first aid itself, is not available with them in terms of getting into the wellness side. So that's the reason why most of the people, most of the athletes here face this kind of a difficult system. So even today, we started discussing this only when the elite sports professionals started talking about openly. So that's a good sign, by the way. But if you see if that's from the school level, the college level, or from the district, state level itself, if you're able to bring in some kind of a psychological training in the mental side, where the previous speakers very clearly mentioned about the importance of psychological wellness also here. So one more point which I think relevant here again is about the stigma attached with it.
Yes.
So why they don't want to talk about it, because they have already created some kind of an image in front of other people. The kind of sports professionals are strong, so they don't want to break that kind of an image. So Viren very clearly mentioned about they're scared about whether it's getting judged about their image. So that itself is another problem which needs to be discussed and debated in open forums like this. So this can be a starting point.
Okay, yes, absolutely. And I do want to spend a little bit more time on the stigma aspect of it in just a bit. But let me also go across to Dr. Ruksheda. Dr. Ruksheda, to your mind, does it add to the challenge if you're in a high pressure or a public profile job? And is it the same for any other profession as it is for sports or the Bollywood industry, or are the pressures a lot higher there?
To begin with, I want to thank Mirror Now and you, Tanvi, especially because you guys have always been so forward-footed in terms of talking about mental health. And a huge, big shout out to Virat Kohli for not only talking about his own struggles, but normalizing talking about it from a position of strength, using his platform to share, and at the same time, just taking over from what Mr. Gopinath said, that the presumption that mental health challenges or mental health illnesses are somehow a result of a weakness. So, when it comes from athletes and revered personalities like him, definitely it goes a long way normalizing talking about it. So kudos to that. And, on behalf of my colleagues and professionals and all other stakeholders, we thank him and you guys as well. When we're talking about people on the top and people who are not only just performing at their best, but wanting to be there, and everybody is looking at them. So the self-pressure that they already had to be best, to be the best at what they're doing and their own personal ambition, then of course, it becomes about representation and it becomes about, okay, I need to also now not let down other people. So the pressure definitely increases. And when we are talking about certain professions, let's say in our country, cricket is a religion, Bollywood is a religion, media is omnipotent, isn't it? And you have, Sunny, you have such a high profile job as well. So I'm sure you can identify with it as well. Not only wanting to kind of do well for yourself, but also feeling the pressure of not letting a whole lot of people down. So that definitely comes in. What we need to understand about mental health is that just like regular health, physical health, mental health is your genetics, right? What you're made up of. And throughout this, as and when we grow, whatever influences and experiences we have impacts our genetics. And that makes it possible for us to have an illness or not have an illness, or have a struggle with an issue or not have to struggle with an issue. So when I'm in a high pressure job, when I'm in a high visibility job, of course that pressure, that external stress is more. And that makes me vulnerable to more mental health issues and psychiatric disorders. So yes, certain jobs do come with a lot of perks. Unfortunately, it also comes with a lot of challenges that are inherently just built.
Yeah.
People, yeah, definitely.
But so, okay, so let's talk about the other big aspect, which is stigma. And which I think is common for no matter what field of work you have and where you come from, because that's in our country, at least, it's a very, very big thing even now. Gopichand, is that a big factor that, it will get covered in the press? Or it will become a factor for if people have to give you more opportunities, or how the society is going to respond to it? Is the stigma still a big factor for people to even acknowledge it and seek help?
Well, I think it is. For one, I think many would talk about it, that they have experienced depressions in the past. But at the moment when they are going through the phase, the stigma stops people from actually mentioning it out. So there is a certain definite amount of secrecy or shyness about or stigma about putting it out on the public platform. So I think from an understanding perspective, it's great that people like Virat have brought this issue up. But I think we as a nation also are not really from their educational perspective, cultural perspective, going through so many changes that we are not sure where our positions are. Because from a cultural perspective, there's a lot of strength which we can gain from our history, from our culture, from our scriptures, and also from our gurus in a lot of ways. So there is inbuilt family systems which have been there for many years, which have crumbled. Our society not knowing whether it's the Eastern culture or the Western culture, we have struggled there. So there's a lot of question marks on a lot of fronts which make people very doubtful and have got us into this position in the first place. So I think it's very important that we start, as Viren has mentioned, as the other speakers have mentioned, to the importance of mental health and the need for us to work towards mental health, not when we have a problem, which is evident, but from the very beginning, like we do physical health. I think we should also take care of our mental aspect on a regular basis.
Yes, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you this question, and since you also now teach and guide so many youngsters, do you sense this struggle even in the next generation, in the newer generations? Or do you see that at least they are a little bit more open about sharing this or seeking professional help? Gopichand, to you.
Well, I think people who aspire to really get to the top, who are pushing themselves physically, emotionally to reach the highest space, have this issue more than a person who's okay with mediocre performances. So I think when people aspire to be the top and who expect nothing but the best for them and the team, I think they're the ones who go through this. So I think a sense of wanting to push is what is important. Yes, to the younger generation, for many of them who don't bother and who take things easy, maybe this may not be a case where they're like, oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter if I win or lose, if I perform or not, if I am in my best shape today or not. But people who really are pushing their physical limits, their emotionally stress to get the performance, if they fail, that is where we have this. So I do believe that there is performance parameters which make it a challenge, and I don't think it is getting over. And if anything, the lack of a structure in our family system or in the societal way of looking at things is only going to make this worse, not better for the future generation.
Yeah, in fact, and I completely agree with you. And for me, that's also an extremely big concern. Even now, if you look at it, and we were having this conversation, just today about how if we treat this issue differently than some of the other countries do. We know, for example, Viren, that the English cricket team has a rotation policy, because the players have been in biobubble for so long. Now, living in such kind of a biobubble is bound to have an impact on your mental health. And so while Australia and English teams are a little bit more cognizant of that fact and open to making those changes, we perhaps are not. And even the players may not want to risk it by even asking for it because there's so much competition. Once you're out, you don't know if you're coming back in.
Definitely. The biobubbles of the IPL teams or the England cricket team, Australian cricket team are a little bit more high profile.
Yeah.
But just talking at domestic level, even the athletes who are preparing for the Tokyo Olympics, whether I can talk about the national shooting camp, archery camp, wrestling, badminton, boxing, they've all been in camps for long periods of time. And that also is a sort of biobubble because no one is allowed to go out. And no one is allowed to come in. And what's happening for very prolonged periods of time, it is taking a very gradual toll on the mental health of athletes. Because I think what we must realize is that athletes also need an outlet sometimes. They need some form of entertainment. They need to live their life. It cannot be only their sport all the time, 24/7. And every single person and definitely athletes need some of their time for themselves, time for self-awareness, where they can get to have fun and not be under pressure to perform all the time. And that's what's happening with biobubbles, and with the pandemic, this problem has only increased. And I think it's becoming more important, like I said at the start, to ensure that they have access to trained sports psychologists at that time, to just have an outlet, to someone to talk to and someone who can guide and mentor them in the right direction.
But this is, could this become, Dr. Gopinath, our next big challenge? The fact that we are now having, like Viren said, not just in cricket or international and high-profile cricket, but across the board, we are now functioning in these biobubbles. Could this become the next big challenge for us? We get done with one pandemic, but look at another one.
Yes, and this is a major issue in almost all domains of our life, primarily because this is a crisis where we're not able to understand how we are going to resolve this issue. A lot of unpredictability, a lot of uncertainty. So the kind of coping strategies we had before may not be enough at this point to resolve these issues. So what happens right now, it's almost like a pressure cooker where you don't have any control over the flame. The only way we can contain that pressure is only by releasing the lid so that the pressure can go out and the pressure cooker can take some more pressure. So that's the reason why we might require professional support for most of the professionals the athletes at this point in time, because they're not able to resolve their issues by themselves. And the pressure is building up and it is going to impact their performance. Already they are tensed, and we cannot run away from anxiety. We cannot run away from tension, because tension, anxiety is minimal level, optimal level is required for them to perform well. But it's crossing that particular barrier at this point, primarily because of their the vending out processes. There is no structured process right now in place where they can resolve their issues. So it's going to be the next pandemic.
Dr. Ruksheda, would you like to comment on this?
Well, I always say the pandemic has impacted 100% of all of us, isn't it? And we also understand that we don't know everything about it, and it impacts other people in different manners. Yes, when we are isolated and our movements are restrictions, that adds to the stress and adds to the difficulty of facing our maybe inner fears that I might get infected or my loved ones maybe get infected. And when we're talking about people performing, especially at a sports level or other levels, if they don't know how to strike that balance between work and life and work and how to then definitely not going to be successful at either one of them. It's important for us to, let people know, and especially athletes, what to look for, what to check for. The psychological, mental health, and psychiatric literacy has to definitely improve because there's no fitness without mental fitness. Just like, they're trained that if this happens or there's a strain or there's a strain in you need to get in touch. The same way we do need to kind of like let them know that, okay, if these are the red signals and red flags, if this happens, you do need to come and speak to us. Of course, prevention is better than cure. So don't wait for something bad to happen for you to reach out and speak to people. Check in with yourself, check in with the professionals if you have access to those professionals. Even if it's just like catching up with what's going on, am I on the right track, mentally, physically, and all of that. So if we wait for a problem to happen and then seek help, sometimes it might be too late. And so mental health literacy definitely has to be part of the training, and part of the trainers have to know what it is. Only then are the athletes and then the upcoming students and sports people are going to know about it and talk about it. Definitely, the younger generation is much better because they're more educated in talking about mental health, and they have less stigma and less resistance to it. They do know how to do self-care in that sense. So that's optimistic in a way. But yes, when you need to understand that there is no one formula that fits everyone, whether that's physical health or mental health as well. So it's important for all of us to take that minute and figure out what is a healthy standard for us, mentally as well as physically. How much do I need to speak to? Who do I need to speak to? And if I'm not already connected with a therapist or a psychiatrist, then for me to just reach out to them in a moment of crisis and then think that I'll be able to get all the help that I need might not always be possible. So again, people in high pressure situations definitely need to already establish a therapeutic relationship with their professional so that in case if they do feel that they need some help, they won't hesitate. And when they do reach out for help, in fact, the help will be faster, more optimal, and more effective, and they'll feel better. And then that will set a good example for other people as well. If you're not, I was just talking to there's this fest going on in NMIMS, a college in Mumbai, and when they said that we're doing the sports fitness thing that we do every year, and I asked them, okay, what are you doing for the mental fitness of the sport? And that's when even they realized that, we don't really include mental health in physical fitness. And that's where a lot of us probably will be lacking. To assume that, to just tell people that you need to be thick-skinned if you want to be in this sport or in this area is, I think, something that we are then excluding a whole lot of talented people. They may not know a certain skill, right? Like whether that's performance-oriented or maybe an ability to take care of their mental health. All you need to do is teach them. And once they learn that, then their performance is going to get better.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to ask about that because when it comes to sports, you're always told that, well, you need to be tough. You need to be physically tough. You need to be mentally tough. You need to tough it up. There is no space for anything less than that if you want to excel. Now, while obviously some amount of extra strength is required to go through that rigorous training, to follow a rigorous schedule and to follow that kind of discipline, are we able to draw the line? And where do you draw the line to say, okay, now beyond this, you're actually beginning to damage a person's mental peace? Dr. Ruksheda?
Okay. So essentially, everybody has their different thresholds. The whole point is there's mental health issues, and then there's mental health disorders. When you're pushing yourself, you're learning all sorts of coping skills to remain mentally healthy and when you're pushing yourself in terms of performance, learning, training, you're again relearning certain adaptive methods in terms of, okay, if this kind of stress happens, how do I use reality-based positive self-affirmations? How do I use focus training so that I can focus on one thing at a time? How do I learn that I can only control this, I can't control that, so let me not worry about it at that time? How do I become oriented to, okay, this one task instead of thinking what might happen next year, whether I'll get taken back in the team or no? So all of these skills are something that keeps, occasionally it requires to get reinforced and unlearned and again relearned. So this is again part of training your brain to build up that resilience that will definitely help in your overall health, and it will positively impact your performance as well. And giving that kind of, normalizing that talk and making it in fact, stressing over it that your mental fitness is going to help your physical fitness. No athlete is ever going to say no. And that's why the understanding of what mental health is and what mental health illness is, that it's not a curse, it's not a weakness, it's not something that's going to make you get excluded from something. When that is understood and accepted, trust me, everybody's going to reach out. And when there is no fear and there's always fear and stigma when there is ignorance. So when we train our, people who are our loved ones and people who are under our care and who are learning something, it's going to benefit them, and because of them, it's also going to benefit the future generations.
Absolutely. Before I wrap up, I just had one question for Pullela Gopichand and then Viren as well. Is for yourself, Pullela, in the year gone by, were there times, or for people around you, those whom you teach, because there was a time when you couldn't get out, when you couldn't be as active as you would want to during the lockdown. How did the athletes and you yourself actually, how did you handle that?
Well, I think for me, the lockdown has in a way given the time in our long careers to actually rest, relax, and actually meditate and kind of benefited from it for me personally, because I thought I've become fitter physically and mentally because of the time I got through the pandemic. Having said that, not all athletes have taken it in the same spirit. We have had players who were bored, who were just tired of sitting at home, and they was just doing not doing the greatest things because they were bored of it. But I think we've managed to through classes on various video conferencing methods have been able to keep players active. So we would have sometimes 3 sessions a day just to make sure that they have something to look forward to. We would have a session at 6 in the morning, although they did nothing else the whole day, because we just wanted them to sleep on time and get up on time. So there are simple things which we tried to do, and those things have really helped. But overall, it was tough, but at least I think we've been lucky in the badminton front that most players have come out of the pandemic stronger.
Well, that would have been really odd, I'm sure, in the beginning, that when you're not meeting up to train or to play, but you're actually having a Zoom call and having conversations with each other at that hour. But, you have to do what you have to do to keep your mind busy, to keep your mind healthy, and really survive through this unprecedented time that we had. I really appreciate all 4 of you joining me in having these conversations, and I hope we can have many, many more conversations, because I truly believe that this is the only way we can shed the stigma, get rid of the stigma, get more people to talk about it, get more people to be aware of what may be happening around them. The other aspect always is that our own ignorance means that rather than helping people around us, we are probably damaging them with our actions, with our words, and we are making it worse for them. We're making it far more difficult for them. So it's really important that we constantly have these conversations. And I think one thing that Pullela Gopichand said really struck a chord with me, that usually we see people open up and talk about what they have gone through in the past. We all as a society collectively should come to a point where people are able to talk about it publicly or to whoever they choose to when they are going through it. that's when truly we will be able to make a difference. Thank you so much for joining us.